Hi, everyone. I'm Brad Free with David Aragona. This is the preview segment of Derby Watch and the final points race on the road toward the 2023 Kentucky Derby will be run this weekend at Keeneland. It's the Lexington Stakes, 20 points to the winner, 8 for the runner-up, 6 points for third place. David, most of the time I wouldn't think that the Lexington had that much significance with regards to the Kentucky Derby, but there is a lot at stake for the connections of Disarm. Talk a little bit about the prospective Lexington lineup.
Yeah, our colleague Marty McGee had tweeted earlier today that we're likely to have a field of 11 when entries are taken for the Lexington today, including Disarm, who was the runner-up in the Louisiana Derby. He has 40 Kentucky Derby qualifying points from that second-place finish, and that's all he's earned towards qualifying for the Kentucky Derby so far. So sounds like Disarm, based on the point standings now, would need a top 3 finish in the Lexington to get up into that top 19 on the point standings, obviously not counting Continuar, who already has that spot in the top 20 secured. So looking for a top 3 effort from Disarm in the Lexington, but with a large field signed on, maybe that's not guaranteed.
Yeah, that would give him 46 points and would virtually guarantee him a berth in the Kentucky Derby. Talking about Disarm, one of the horses that I'm a little surprised, at least as of Wednesday morning, we did not expect to see him entered in the race. And it's kind of a key defection, for lack of a better word, but Confidence Game, who won the Rebel Stakes in late February. That race took a lot out of him. He hasn't started since then. There was talk about maybe using the Lexington as a prep. As of Wednesday morning, his trainer Keith DeSormo said, I'm going to train him into the Kentucky Derby. That's a big gap. That's a gap of more than 2 months for Confidence Game. To me, it doesn't lend itself to a lot of optimism with regards to Confidence Game's chances in the Kentucky Derby. Would you agree, David?
For sure. I'm kind of the opposite of what his name suggests. Just a horse that had a lot to prove after that Rebel Stakes. It came over a sloppy track. He got a good trip in a race where some others had bad trips. And you wanted to see some validation of that performance before he runs in the Kentucky Derby. But obviously, for whatever reason, him taking some time to recover from that effort, his connections decided it's best by the horse to train into the race. So we'll see how that works out. But long layoffs into the Kentucky Derby, often not a winning formula.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Rules are made to be broken. Sooner or later, a horse from Dubai is going to come over and run well in the Kentucky Derby. We'll find out. I did just a little bit of quick research regarding the Lexington significance as far as the Kentucky Derby goes. Since 2010, there have been 3 horses I could find that ran in the Lexington and came back and ran in the Kentucky Derby. In 2011, Derby Kitten won the Lexington, finished 13th in the Derby 2 weeks later. In 2018, My Boy Jack won the Lexington, came back 3 weeks later, finished 5th in the Derby. And in 2022, Tawny Port, winner of the Lexington, 7th in the Derby. So it's a race that doesn't have a lot of, bearing on the top finishers, but it is significant this year because if Disarm runs in the top 3, he's in the Derby field. And that would push Skinner down a little bit further as well. So we'll find out more about the Lexington Stakes on Saturday and what its bearing is on the Kentucky Derby. In the meantime, it's time to start handicapping the Kentucky Derby. We're not going to make any selections right now, more than 3 weeks out, but let's talk a little bit about a factor that I consider the most influential in terms of price. It's not the most important factor, but it's the most important factor in regards to the ultimate odds that these horses go off at. And I'm referring to speed figures. We're going to take a look at a chart of the last out speed figures and the top 5, I believe, 2 fills with that 101. Problem was it was on synthetic. Practical Move. I thought the Santa Anita Derby might come back low rated. It did not. I do my own speed figures and was very close to what Andy Beyer came up with a 100. Tapatrice and Verifying a 99 each. Dermis Sotogake did not get a Beyer speed figure for his win in the UAE Derby, but I believe if one had been assigned, it would be somewhere in the 106 range, which would make him the fastest horse in the field. So there's a look at the top speed figures. David, do you want to add with regards to the fastest horses, and I put in air quotes, fastest horses in the Derby going into the Derby?
Yeah, obviously it's uncommon that you'd have the horse coming in with the highest last out buyer not listed as one of the favorites, but having achieved that number on a synthetic course, there are still some questions about how fast two fills can run on a conventional dirt racetrack. So that's why I've got his Derby Watch odds at 20-1. There might be some more horses added to this list if some of the on the bubble horses like Skinner or Mandarin Hero ultimately do make it into the Kentucky Derby field. They earn buyers of 99 and 100 respectively in the Santa Anita Derby, so they would certainly be in this mix. And then with regard to Derma Sotogake, who obviously does not have an official buyer assigned, I was talking to my colleague Craig Mulkowski, who makes the Timeform US speed figures, and over the past week, he's done some intensive timing of those races from Dubai just to sort of confirm that what showed up on the clock is legitimate. And he basically put out some evidence that that 155 and 4 totally in line with the official time. The comparison to the Dubai World Cup that a lot of people are making is legitimate. The pace of that race was honest. He's going to have some more about where these horses could slot into the Derby pace situation. But Derma Sotogake, he was saying that the horse would get, if he was making a speed figure for that race, a Timeform US number of around 121, which would translate to a buyer somewhere in the low 100s. So a lot of the assumptions around this horse coming out of a very fast race do appear to be accurate.
Two fills with a 101 buyer on synthetic, Derma Sotogake with an estimated figure somewhere in the low 100s. The top two horses in the field, fastest horses in the field, going to try to replicate that performance on dirt at Churchill Downs. Okay, one of the themes that we've kind of briefly discussed over the last few weeks is the kind of lack of true speed among the horses that have been listed on Derby Watch. So we thought we'd take a look at the potential pace setters as of Wednesday morning, and knowing that the complexion of this field, prospective field, could change. And let's take a look at some of the potential pace setters. Derma Sotogake, he was not particularly known as a front runner, but he went wire to wire in the UAE Derby. Same with Kingsbarns. Kingsbarns came from off the pace his first two starts. He got loose on a very slow pace in the Louisiana Derby, wired the field. Mage, I guess he's a pace setter, but he's going to have to learn how to break, which he did not do in the Fountain of Youth or the Florida Derby. Reincarnate, I'm starting to wonder if his grade 3 sham stakes 3 starts back, in which he was smoking up on the front end, 45 and 2, 109 and 2, maybe that was the aberration. I keep hoping that he'd come back and show that type of intense speed, but it hasn't happened in 2 subsequent starts. And then Jace's Road is a forwardly placed horse as well. So, David, what do you have to add with regards to the potential pace scenario of the Kentucky Derby?
Yeah, it's an interesting situation because none of these horses are one-dimensional frontrunners by any means. They've all shown differing running styles in recent starts. Mage might be the naturally fastest of these horses just based on how fast he ran in his debut race, but he's had some major issues getting out of the gate in 2 consecutive starts. So that's a wild card for him. And Jace's Road, a horse that a lot of people expected to be on the lead in the Louisiana Derby, he wasn't. Maybe the connections will go back to front-running tactics for the Kentucky Derby. He has scored a gate-to-wire stakes victory in the past. So a lot of questions to be answered, including from the Japanese horse, Derma Sotogake, who, as you said, went gate-to-wire in that UAE Derby, but had raced from off the pace in many of his prior starts. So hard to know exactly who'll be on the front end in this Kentucky Derby, but sometimes murky pace situations produce unexpectedly fast paces.
Everybody looks at the past performances and go, well, nobody wants the lead. I think I'll take it. And suddenly you have 5 horses battling for the lead. You're right, David. Those 5, none of those 5 that are listed on that list are real confirmed, genuine speed types. So they're versatile. They've been on the lead kind of by default in some of their races. I think that it's something that we're going to need to monitor as we get closer to the Kentucky Derby. This is a race that could potentially unfold at a relatively soft clip. Certainly nothing like last year when it appeared there was lots of speed and it unfolded accordingly. Okay, before we sign off, it's time to go to the On the Bubble segment. Now we're literally on the bubble. Skinner and Cyclone Mischief, we kind of assumed that they would make the field But as of Wednesday, they're not in yet. Skinner's the first one in with 45 points. He ran well in the Santa Anita Derby. Cyclone Mischief, he ran, both those horses finished third, Santa Anita Derby and Florida Derby, Skinner and Cyclone Mischief. Number 22, Major Dude. I'm surprised they're talking about the Derby. I think he's a grass horse, a synthetic horse, but he has 40 points. He's on the bubble. Mandarin Hero, man, he came a nose short of upsetting Practical Move in the Santa Anita Derby. It's unfortunate that Mandarin Hero, second in the Santa Anita Derby with a 100 buyer speed figure, is not in the Derby field, whereas Wild on Ice, who won the Sunland Derby with a 77 buyer speed figure, is in the field. King Russell, runner-up in the Arkansas Derby, and Disarm, we expect him to try to add to that 40 points this weekend into Lexington. David, there are some good horses on the bubble list. Would you agree?
For sure. There are horses that would definitely move the Derby odds board a little bit, particularly those two out of the Santa Anita Derby, Skinner and Mandarin Hero, who got such high last out speed figures. If they got into the race, they would certainly attract some support. Maybe Disarm will join that list, depending on how he runs in the Lexington on Saturday. But something to keep in mind is that at this time last year, I believe Rich Strike still needed 7 defections to get into the Kentucky Derby field, and he obviously did, winning the race last year. So a lot can change between now and the time that the Derby's run in early May.
No doubt about it. By the way, just a quick note, on the bottom, we have number 17 ranked. Blazing Sevens is unconfirmed. It appears that the connections of Blazing Sevens, at least trainer Chad Brown, has not quite committed Blazing Sevens to the Derby. If I had to guess, I'd say he'd skip. But as of right now, he's still in. Well, we'll see what happens. I'll just leave it at that. I hope somebody comes out and gives Skinner a chance to get in. Would like to see Mandarin Hero in the field as well, as the Japanese breeding program becomes an international success. That's a look at the On the Bubble. That's it for Derby Watch for this week. By next week, we'll have an even more accurate picture of the Kentucky Derby perspective field. For David Aragona, I'm Brad Freed. We'll see you next week.